Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Ghost in Kandahar. The 120-degree heat of Kandahar hit like a wall, even at 300 hours. Hubert Cornell moved through the compound's shadows with practiced silence, his 416 Hong Kong dollars tucked against his chest. Behind him, 3 other operators from Delta Force's Bravo team materialized from the darkness like wraiths. Ghost, 1, you're clear to the door. Marcus Smith's voice crackled in his earpiece. Marcus was Overwatch, 200 yards out with a Barrett .50 cal. They'd worked together for 6 years, longer than Hubert had been married. Hubert had earned the call sign Ghost the hard way. 57 confirmed eliminations across 4 continents. The kind of numbers that got you noticed in special operations circles and made you invisible everywhere else. That's exactly how he needed it. He pressed his frame against the mud brick compound wall. Inside, 3 high-value targets were sleeping, Taliban commanders who'd orchestrated attacks, killing 17 coalition soldiers in the past month. By dawn, they'd be memories. The breach was textbook. Flashbang. Entry, 3 suppressed double taps. 7 minutes from insertion to exfil. Clean. Nice work, Ghost, Marcus said as they headed back to base. That's 57. Just another night at the office, Hubert replied, his voice flat. The truth was, each one haunted him differently. Not with guilt. These men had earned their fate, but with the weight of what he'd become. A ghost. A cleaner of messes. The man who did what others couldn't. Back at base, Hubert shed his tactical gear and became someone else entirely. He showered, changed into civilian clothes, and headed to the small recreation area. The other soldiers there knew him as Cornell the Janitor, the civilian contractor who supposedly cleaned offices at Bagram Airfield and rotated down to Kandahar for extra pay. It was the perfect cover. Delta operators often worked under civilian cover for deployment security. If Taliban intelligence got wind of Delta Force movements, operators' families stateside became targets. So Hubert Cornell, the Janitor, called home every week to talk to his 8-year-old daughter, Laurel, about homework and cartoons. He pulled out his satellite phone and checked the time. 1,600 hours in Virginia. Laurel will be home from school. The phone rang 4 times before his mother, Frances Cornell, answered. Hubert, honey, I was hoping you'd call. Hey, Ma, how's my girl? There was a pause. Too long. She's fine, sweetheart. Playing in the yard. Ma, what's wrong? Hubert's instincts, honed by years of reading micro-expressions and vocal tells, prickled. It's nothing. Miranda's just been. Frances trailed off. She's been going out a lot. Says she needs time to herself. I've been watching Laurel most evenings. Hubert's jaw tightened. His wife, Miranda, had been distant for the past 3 months. Texts were short. Calls infrequent. He'd attributed it to the stress of deployment, but this felt different. Let me talk to Laurel. His daughter's voice was sunshine. Daddy, I got an A on my science project. Grandma helped me build a volcano. For 15 minutes, Hubert forgot about Taliban commanders and midnight raids. He was just a father, proud of his daughter's papier-mâché volcano. I love you, princess. Be good for Grandma. When are you coming home, Daddy? Soon, baby. Real soon. But that was a lie. He had 3 more months on this rotation. 3 more months of being a ghost. What Hubert didn't know was that Miranda hadn't been going out alone. She'd been going out with Blake Ball, a small-time drug dealer from Richmond who drove a loud Dodge Charger and wore gold chains like armor against his own inadequacy. And Blake Ball had just made the worst mistake of his life. He'd convinced himself that Hubert Cornell was exactly what he appeared to be, a nobody janitor too weak to protect his family. Chapter 2. The Call. 2 weeks later, Hubert was in the Tactical Operations Center reviewing intelligence on a new target when his satellite phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Operational security meant limiting unexpected contact. But something made him step outside. Is this Hubert Cornell? The voice was male, cocky, with a laugh bubbling underneath the words. Who's this? Someone who's been keeping your wife company while you're playing janitor in the sandbox. The laugh burst through. Name's Blake. Me and Miranda, we've been real close. She tells me everything about you. Hubert's blood went cold, but his voice remained steady. If you have something to say, say it. Oh, I got plenty to say, janitor boy. But first, I got something you need to hear. The sound that came through the phone, a choking gasp, a thump, then silence, stopped Hubert's heart. That was your mother, Hubert. Frances, right? She came over to your house all high and mighty, telling Miranda to end things with me. Tried to threaten me in my own house. Can you believe that? Hubert's vision tunneled. His mother, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died in a factory accident. The woman who'd never missed a school play, who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to college, who'd volunteered to watch Laurel every deployment. What did you do? The words came out like gravel. Bitch choked on her own dinner. I might have helped along, pushed her face down into that plate a little harder than necessary. But here's the best part. Your little girl was watching from the hallway. She saw everything. Then another voice, small and terrified. Daddy, Daddy, help me. He's hurting me. The phone went dead. Hubert stood frozen in the Afghan night, the phone still pressed to his ear. Around him, the bass hummed with activity, but he heard none of it. His mind had gone to a place beyond rage, beyond grief. A cold, calculating space where emotion was weaponized into precision. His phone buzzed again. Text message from Miranda. Don't bother coming home. We don't need a janitor. Blake makes more in a week than you do in a year. Divorce papers will be waiting. And forget about seeing Laurel. She needs a real father now. Another text, this one a photo. Blake in Hubert's house, sitting in Hubert's chair, wearing Hubert's watch, a vintage Rolex his father had left him. Miranda was on his lap, smiling wider than she'd smiled at her own wedding. Hubert pocketed the phone and walked with measured steps to find his commanding officer, Colonel Douglas Turner. Cornell, Turner said, reading something in Hubert's expression that made him straighten immediately. What happened? My mother's been murdered, sir. My daughter's in immediate danger. I need emergency leave. Turner didn't hesitate. 40 minutes later, Hubert was on AC-130 heading to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. From there, a military transport to Dover. Then a 3-hour drive to Richmond. During the flights, Hubert didn't sleep. Instead, he reconstructed his life with Miranda, looking for the signs he'd missed. They'd met 6 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep, beautiful, charming, ambitious. The courtship was fast. Marriage after 8 months. Laurel arrived a year later. But Miranda had always wanted more. More money, more status, more attention. When Hubert joined Delta Force 3 years into their marriage, he couldn't tell her the truth. Operational security meant his cover as a civilian contractor was absolute. To Miranda, he was just a janitor making $45,000 a year, gone for months at a time. She'd grown resentful. Cold. He tried to explain he was working on government contracts, but she didn't want to hear it. She wanted a husband who drove a luxury car and wore designer suits, not combat boots and Kevlar. Now it made sense. She'd found someone who looked like success, even if that success came from selling poison on street corners. The plane touched down at Dover at 0600. By 1,000 hours, Hubert was in a rental car heading south on I-95, still wearing civilian clothes, looking like a tired contractor coming home from deployment. But inside, Ghost was awake, and Ghost was going to work. Chapter 3, Reconnaissance. Hubert's childhood home in Richmond's Churchill neighborhood looked the same from the outside, a modest 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. But the yellow police tape across the front door told a different story. He parked a block away and sat, watching. A lifetime of surveillance training meant he noticed everything. The neighbor's curtain moving on the second floor, the unmarked sedan 3 houses down with 2 occupants, the fresh cigarette butts on the sidewalk across the street. His phone rang. Marcus Smith. Brother, I heard. I'm so sorry. Marcus's voice was thick with genuine grief. He'd met Frances twice, both times charming her with stories that carefully edited out the dangerous parts of their work. I need information, Marcus. Everything on Blake Ball, Richmond, Virginia. And I need it yesterday. Already started. I'll have a dossier by tonight. What else? I need to know where my daughter is. On it. Sit tight. But sitting tight wasn't in Hubert's nature. He got out of the car and approached the house next door, where he'd seen the curtain move. Before he could knock, the door opened. Helen Rivers was 73, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived next to Francis for 20 years. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but sharp. "Hubert Cornell," she said. "I've been waiting for you." Inside her living room, Helen poured coffee with shaking hands. "Your mother was murdered. Don't let them tell you it was an accident. Tell me everything." Helen sat, composing herself. "3 days ago, around 7 in the evening, I heard shouting from your house. Francis's car was in the driveway, which was unusual. She'd been staying there a lot, watching Laurel while Miranda was out. I looked out my window and saw a man I didn't recognize. Big guy, tattoos on his neck, wearing all black. He went inside. Blake Ball," Hubert said flatly. "If that's his name." About 30 minutes later, I heard your mother scream. Then nothing. At 10 p.m., an ambulance came. They brought Francis out on a stretcher, covered completely. The police came, asked Miranda some questions, and left. That was it. Ruled it an accidental choking death the next day. Where was my daughter during this? Helen's face crumpled. That little girl. I saw her that night, Hubert. Miranda walked her over here around 8 p.m., said Francis had to go to the hospital, and could I watch Laurel? That poor child was shaking, wouldn't talk. She stayed in my guest room, crying for her grandmother. Miranda picked her up the next morning, and I haven't seen Laurel since." Hubert's hands clenched around his coffee mug. "What do the police say?" "I tried to tell them what I saw. That man going into the house, the timeline. They said I was a confused old woman. The detective, Jerome Blake, he was particularly dismissive. Said all the evidence pointed to accidental death, and I should stop spreading rumors." Helen leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Hubert. That detective? Jerome Blake? Same last name as the man I saw. I did some asking around. They're cousins. There was corruption. A crooked cop protecting a killer. Where's my daughter now? Your house, I think. I've seen Miranda's car coming and going. Sometimes that man's car, too. Loud thing, sounds like thunder. I took down his license plate." She handed Hubert a piece of paper. "I also took photos from my window the night your mother died. The timestamps on them." Hubert took the paper and a small envelope of printed photos. Helen Rivers had just handed him evidence the police had ignored or buried. "Thank you, Mrs. Rivers. You may have saved my daughter's life. Your mother was a saint, Hubert. She talked about you all the time. Was so proud of you. She said you did important work overseas, though she wasn't sure what. She'd be proud of you now, too. If she only knew," Hubert thought. He left Helen's house and drove to his own home 3 miles away in the suburbs. It was a nice neighborhood. Large yards, good schools, the kind of place where people washing their cars on Saturday afternoons. His house was a split-level ranch with a 2-car garage. Blake's Dodge Charger, matte black with tinted windows and aftermarket exhaust, was parked in Hubert's driveway. Hubert drove past without slowing, circling the block. Rage threatened to overwhelm his training, but he forced it down. Emotion was the enemy. Precision was the weapon. He parked in a grocery store lot 2 blocks away and called Marcus. "I got your intel," Marcus said. Blake Ball, age 32. 2 felony convictions, assault and distribution. Both pled down to misdemeanors through his cousin, Detective Jerome Blake. Runs drugs through a tattoo parlor called Ink Dynasty in Shockoe Bottom. Known associates, Freddie Wiley and Zach Gibson, both with similar records. Blake's been on DEA's radar for 2 years, but nothing stuck because Jerome feeds him information. What about his operation? Mid-level dealer, not a kingpin. Moves cocaine and fentanyl, mostly to suburban clients. Makes about $300,000 a year cash. Drives the Charger, wears expensive clothes, spends money on flashy things. Classic insecure thug playing kingpin. Military background? None. He's tough in the sense that he beats up civilians and intimidates witnesses. But against trained operators? Marcus paused. He's a civilian. What about Miranda? She filed for emergency custody of Laurel 3 days ago, citing your abandonment and inability to provide. Got a temporary order because you were overseas and unreachable. Hearing scheduled for next week. Hubert's jaw tightened. She's using my cover against me. Looks like it. She's claiming you're an unstable janitor who abandoned his family for low-paying contract work. Blake's even providing financial support affidavits, positioning himself as the stable father figure. And Francis? Marcus's voice dropped. Ruled accidental death by asphyxiation. Medical examiner is retiring next month. Didn't look too closely. Detective Jerome Blake signed off on it personally. Case closed. Hubert thanked Marcus and ended the call. He sat in the rental car as evening turned to dusk, his mind working through scenarios. Blake Ball had murdered his mother, threatened his daughter, stolen his wife, and was about to take full custody using corrupt police connections and Hubert's own cover identity against him. Blake thought he was dealing with a weak janitor who cleaned floors for minimum wage. He had no idea he'd just declared war on one of the most lethal operators in the United States military. Hubert started the car. He had work to do. Chapter 4. The Broken Home. The law office of Carroll Pollard & Associates occupied a brick building near the Virginia state capitol. Hubert arrived at 0800 the next morning wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, the uniform of a civilian contractor trying to look respectable. Carroll Pollard was 56, with silver hair and a reputation for winning custody cases. Hubert had found him through a military legal assistance program. "Mr. Cornell," Pollard said, reviewing the emergency custody petition. "This is aggressive. Your wife's claiming abandonment, inability to provide, and emotional instability. She's got affidavits from neighbors saying you've been gone for months at a time with no contact. I was deployed overseas on a government contract. I called home every week. Can you prove it? Phone records, yes. Good. What about income? She claims you make $45,000 as a janitor at Bagram Airfield." This was the moment Hubert had been dreading. His Delta Force salary was classified, routed through a series of government accounts designed to protect operator identities. He could reveal his true position, but that would expose operational security and possibly endanger other operators. "I can provide financial documentation showing substantial income through government accounts, but much of it is classified." Pollard raised an eyebrow. "Classified? Mr. Cornell, what exactly do you do?" "I'm a defense contractor specializing in specialized security operations. The details are protected under federal law." It was technically true. Delta operators often operated under civilian contractor covers for legal protection. "Can you get security clearance paperwork to prove this?" "I can get documentation from my commanding officer. It won't specify my work, but it will confirm income and employment status." Pollard nodded slowly. "That might work. But there's another problem. Your mother's death. Your wife is claiming you're emotionally compromised and potentially dangerous. She's got a statement from you threatening Blake Ball over the phone." "I never," Hubert stopped. Blake had recorded their call, edited it. "He murdered my mother. Suffocated her. The police called it an accident because the detective investigating is his cousin." "That's a serious allegation. Do you have proof?" "I have a witness, timeline inconsistencies, and I'm gathering more." Pollard leaned back. "Mr. Cornell, I'm going to be honest. Right now, you look like a struggling contractor who abandoned his family and is making wild accusations after a family tragedy. I can fight this, but I need ammunition. Give me that documentation from your CEO. Give me concrete evidence about your mother's death. And most importantly, don't do anything stupid. No contact with Blake Ball. No confrontations with your wife. Clean living, documented stability. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." But that was a lie. After the meeting, Hubert drove to Ink Dynasty, the tattoo parlor in Shockoe Bottom where Blake ran his operation. The neighborhood was gentrifying. Old warehouses converted to lofts, trendy restaurants alongside dive bars. The parlor occupied a corner building with blacked-out windows and a neon sign. Hubert parked across the street and watched. Over 3 hours, he observed. Blake arriving at noon in the Charger, parking in the alley. Freddie Wiley, a wiry man with a shaved head, arriving in a Honda Civic. Zach Gibson, heavy set with neck tattoos, arriving on a motorcycle. Several customers entering, staying 10 to 15 minutes, too short for actual tattoos. A pattern. Customers texted before entering, left with small packages. Classic front operation. Legitimate tattoo business in the front, drug deals in the back. Hubert took photos with a telephoto lens, documenting license plates, faces, timestamps. This was reconnaissance, the first step in any operation. Around 3 p.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then remembered. Laurel. Hello. Daddy. His daughter's voice was small, scared. Laurel. Baby, where are you? I'm home. Mommy's not here. Blake is. He says I have to call you. He wants to talk. Then Blake's voice. Hey, Janitor. Thanks for coming back to town. Makes things easier. Hubert's voice went cold. If you touch her, you'll what? Call the cops? My cousin's a detective, remember? File for custody? Your wife's already got that covered. Face it, Cornell. You're a loser who chose a paycheck over his family. Now someone else is stepping up to be Laurel's real daddy. Let me talk to my daughter. See, that's where you're confused. She's not your daughter anymore. She's being raised by a real man now. But hey, since I'm feeling generous, you can say goodbye. Daddy, please come get me. I'm scared. I want Grandma. Where's Grandma? The line went dead. Hubert sat in the car, breathing through the rage. Blake was escalating, trying to provoke him into doing something stupid that would strengthen Miranda's custody case. It was a smart play if Blake had been dealing with an actual janitor. But Blake had made a critical tactical error. He'd given Hubert motivation and a target. That evening, Hubert checked into a budget motel near the interstate. He laid out everything he'd gathered on the bed. Photos, notes, Helen Rivers' evidence, and a laptop where he began compiling a target package. His phone rang. Colonel Turner. Cornell, how are you holding up? I've been better, sir. I'm calling because your emergency leave is about to end. I can extend it another 2 weeks, but after that, I need you back or you'll have to resign from the unit. Resignation from Delta meant losing his clearance, his cover, and any protection that came with it. But staying meant leaving Laurel in danger. 2 weeks, Hubert said. I'll take it. Understood. And Cornell? Marcus told me what's happening. Unofficially, if you need resources, reach out. We protect our own. After Turner hung up, Hubert received an encrypted email from Marcus. The subject line read, Dossier complete. Inside was everything. Blake's financial records obtained through less than legal means, his daily patterns, associates' backgrounds, safe house locations, supply chains, and, most importantly, evidence of prior violence. Blake had beaten a man nearly to death 2 years ago. The victim, Oscar Walker, had been paid off and refused to testify. But the hospital records existed, and Marcus had found them. There was also information on Detective Jerome Blake, 38 years old, 15 years on the force, currently under internal investigation for evidence tampering in an unrelated case. Not as protected as he thought. Hubert studied the dossier until 0200, memorizing everything. Then he slept for 4 hours, a Delta operator's full night, and woke with a plan forming. Blake Ball had killed his mother, threatened his daughter, and stolen his wife. He was protected by a corrupt cop and thought himself untouchable. He learned differently, but first, Hubert needed to separate Laurel from danger. Everything else was secondary. Chapter 5. The Weak Man's Game. The custody hearing was held in juvenile court, a sterile room with fluorescent lights and cheap paneling. Miranda sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Edward Frost who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Blake sat behind her in a gallery, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Hubert's monthly salary, or what Miranda thought his salary was. Hubert sat across the aisle with Carol Pollard, wearing the same khakis and button-down. He deliberately looked tired, defeated. The weak Janitor Miranda expected. Judge Vera Connor, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the petitions. This is a preliminary hearing regarding emergency custody of Laurel Cornell, age 8. Mrs. Cornell, you're seeking full custody based on claims of abandonment and inability to provide. Mr. Cornell, you're contesting. Let's hear opening statements. Frost stood, his voice smooth. Your Honor, Hubert Cornell is a man who chose to abandon his family for months at a time, working minimum wage jobs in war zones while his wife struggled to raise their daughter alone. His mother, God rest her soul, died while he was overseas, and even then, he couldn't be bothered to return for the funeral. He makes $45,000 a year as a janitor, while my client has secured a stable home environment with the help of Blake Ball, who has generously provided financial and emotional support. It was a masterful distortion. Hubert had been on emergency leave when Frances was buried, but Miranda had deliberately held the funeral 2 days after her death, before he could possibly return from Afghanistan. The generous support from Blake came from drug money. Pollard stood, his voice calm. Your Honor, Mr. Cornell was deployed overseas on a classified government contract when his mother died tragically. He took the first available transport home, a journey that takes 48 to 72 hours from Afghanistan. He's been a primary financial provider for this family, and his income substantially exceeds the figure cited. We have documentation from his commanding officer confirming both his employment status and his exemplary record. As for Blake Ball's generous support, we believe the court should scrutinize the source of that generosity. Judge Connor looked at Hubert. Mr. Cornell, where do you work? Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, Your Honor. I'm a defense contractor with security clearance. The specifics are classified. Can you provide documentation? Pollard handed over a folder. Inside was a letter from Colonel Turner, carefully worded. Hubert Cornell has been employed as a civilian contractor with the Department of Defense since 2018, maintaining TS/SCI clearance and serving with distinction. His annual compensation is approximately $175,000. Due to operational security requirements, further details cannot be disclosed. Frost objected immediately. Your Honor, this is convenient. Classified, work that can't be verified? My client lived with Mr. Cornell for years and knew him as a janitor. This sudden claim of six-figure income and classified work appears to be fabrication designed to bolster his custody claim. I have pay stubs, Hubert said quietly, routed through government accounts. My wife never saw them because I kept them in a security deposit box per operational security requirements. It was true. Delta operators maintained financial separation to protect families from being targeted. Miranda had handled the household account, which Hubert funded with regular transfers, but never saw his classified income documents. Judge Connor reviewed the pay stubs. These appear legitimate. Mrs. Cornell, were you aware of this income? Miranda's face flushed. No, Your Honor. He told me he was a janitor. He lived like a janitor. If he made this much money, why did we struggle? We didn't struggle, Hubert said, his voice still quiet but firm. I transferred money to our joint account every month. You had access to a car, a house, credit cards. The money was there. Frost jumped in. Your Honor, this highlights the deception in Mr. Cornell's character. If he was lying to his wife about his employment, what else was he lying about? This secrecy created a hostile home environment. The secrecy, Pollard countered, was legally required to protect his family. Operators with security clearances cannot disclose their work without endangering themselves and their families. The hearing continued for an hour. Miranda's lawyer painted Hubert as an absent father. Hubert's lawyer presented evidence of regular contact. Phone records showing weekly calls, emails, even letters Laurel had received. Then Frost played his trump card. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Cornell has been making threats against Blake Ball, my client's fiancé. Mr. Ball received a phone call from Mr. Cornell containing explicit threats of violence. We believe Mr. Cornell is emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous. They played the recording. Blake's voice, hey, janitor. Thanks for coming back to town. Hubert's voice, if you touch her. Blake, you'll what? It was edited to remove Blake's taunts about Frances's death and Laurel's fear, making it sound like Hubert was the aggressor. Judge Connor looked troubled. Mr. Cornell, did you threaten Mr. Ball? No, Your Honor. That recording is edited. Blake Ball called me while I was overseas to tell me he'd kill my mother and was threatening my daughter. I was responding to protect Laurel. That's a serious accusation, the judge said. Do you have evidence? The police ruled my mother's death accidental, but I have a witness who saw Blake Ball enter the house shortly before her death and heard sounds consistent with violence. The detective who investigated, Jerome Blake, is Blake Ball's cousin and has a documented history of protecting him. Frost laughed, actually laughed. Your Honor, This is paranoid conspiracy theory. Francis Cornell's death was ruled accidental by the medical examiner. Mr. Cornell is making wild accusations because he can't accept his own failures as a husband and father. The judge raised her hand. Enough. This preliminary hearing is about custody, not a criminal investigation. Mr. Cornell, I appreciate your service, and I see evidence of consistent contact with your daughter. However, I also see evidence that you've been absent for extended periods and that your wife has established a stable home in your absence. Given the recent family trauma and allegations of threats, I'm going to maintain temporary custody with Mrs. Cornell, but grant Mr. Cornell supervised visitation rights, twice a week, supervised by a court-appointed guardian. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full hearing. Hubert felt the loss like a punch. Supervised visitation, twice a week. Laurel was still in Blake's house. As they filed out, Blake walked past Hubert and whispered, "Told you, Janitor. You can't win." Hubert said nothing. He watched Blake put his arm around Miranda, watched them walk toward the Charger parked illegally in a handicapped spot. That night, Hubert met Marcus Smith at a diner off I-64. Marcus was technically on leave, but he'd driven down from Fort Bragg when Hubert called. "Supervised visitation," Marcus said, shaking his head. "That's bullshit." "It gives me access," Hubert said. "Twice a week, I can see Laurel, make sure she's okay. And it gives me time." "Time for what?" Hubert pulled out a notebook. "Blake's vulnerable in 3 areas. 1. His operation relies on a small crew and a specific supply chain. 2. His protection comes from one corrupt cop who's already under investigation. 3. He thinks I'm a weak civilian." Marcus grinned. "You're going operational. I'm protecting my daughter, if that requires removing threats." Hubert shrugged. "What do you need?" "Information first. I need to know Blake's suppliers, his routes, his safe houses. I need to know what he's planning with Miranda and Laurel. And I need to know everything about Detective Jerome Blake's corruption. That's going to take some creative intelligence gathering. That's why I called you." Over the next week, they worked in tandem. Marcus used his military connections to access criminal databases, financial records, and surveillance footage. Hubert conducted physical surveillance, mapping Blake's operation with precision. What they discovered was troubling. Blake was planning to leave Richmond. He'd purchased plane tickets to Mexico City for 3 people, him, Miranda, and Laurel, departing in 2 weeks. He'd also transferred $400,000 to an offshore account. He wasn't building a future with Miranda. He was planning an exit. "He's running," Marcus said, looking at the evidence. Something spooked him. Maybe he knows the DEA's circling. Maybe he knows killing Francis Cornell was too messy. "Or he's planning to disappear with my daughter," Hubert said coldly. "You think Miranda knows?" "I think Miranda knows he's leaving, but doesn't know she's not coming with him." They also discovered something about Francis's death that the police had missed. Helen Rivers's photos showed Blake entering Hubert's house at 7:15 p.m. Francis's 911 call, which had been buried in the file, was time-stamped 7:43 p.m. For 28 minutes, Francis had been alone in the house with Blake. Then someone called 911 from her phone, saying she'd choked. But here's what the police hadn't noticed. The caller's voice wasn't Francis. It was Blake disguising his voice as an elderly woman, claiming she had choked and needed help. He called 911 himself, Marcus realized. Made it seem like Francis called before losing consciousness. But really, he killed her and staged it to look like she'd choked while calling for help. "Which means the 911 recording has Blake's real voice on it," Hubert said. "Hidden under an old woman impression." "Yeah, but voice analysis could prove it." They now had evidence that Francis was murdered and that Blake had covered it up. They also had evidence that Detective Jerome Blake had deliberately buried the investigation. But evidence only mattered if someone would act on it. With Jerome Blake protecting his cousin and the medical examiner already signing off on accidental death, the local police were useless. "We need to go federal," Marcus said. "FBI, maybe DEA. Someone outside Richmond PD's corruption." "Not yet," Hubert said. "If we tip our hand, Blake runs early. We need to control the timeline." "What's the play?" Hubert looked at his friend. "Blake thinks he's won. He thinks he's got my wife, my daughter, and he's about to disappear with everything. We let him think that. Meanwhile, I dismantle his operation piece by piece. When he finally realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. That's a big operation for one guy. I'm not one guy. I'm a ghost. And ghosts have a way of making people disappear. Chapter 6. The First Cut. The supervised visitation happened at a family center in downtown Richmond. A cheerful place with toys and games where parents who'd lost custody rights could see their children under watchful eyes. Laurel arrived with a court-appointed supervisor, a kind woman named Cecilia McFarland. Miranda had deliberately stayed away, per court order, but Hubert knew she was probably sitting in the parking lot with Blake. When Laurel saw him, she ran. "Daddy!" Hubert caught her, holding tight. She was thinner than he remembered, dark circles under her eyes. "Hey, princess. I missed you so much." They spent the hour playing board games and talking. Laurel was quiet, withdrawn. The supervisor gave them space, but watched carefully. "Daddy, when can I come live with you?" Laurel whispered when they were playing Monopoly. "Soon, baby. I promise. I don't like Blake. He's mean. He yells at Mommy. And he said bad things about Grandma." Hubert's hands tightened on the dice. "What kind of bad things?" "He said she was stupid, that she shouldn't have come to the house, that it was her fault Laurel's voice broke. "Is Grandma really gone?" "Yes, sweetheart, but it wasn't her fault. None of this is your fault." After the hour ended, Hubert watched Laurel leave with the supervisor, walking toward Miranda's car. Blake was in the driver's seat. He saw Hubert watching and grinned, giving a mocking wave. That night, Hubert put his plan into motion. Blake's operation ran on a simple schedule. Shipments arrived every Thursday from a supplier in D.C., distributed through the tattoo parlor on Friday and Saturday, with Monday being collection day. Freddie Wiley handled street sales. Zach Gibson handled enforcement and security. Hubert decided to start with Freddie. Using surveillance and Marcus's intelligence, Hubert learned that Freddie lived in a rundown apartment complex in South Richmond. Every Wednesday night, Freddie collected money from various dealers and stored it in his apartment before delivering it to Blake on Thursday morning. On Wednesday at 11 p.m., Hubert was waiting in the apartment's parking lot, dressed in dark clothes, face covered. He'd done this kind of operation hundreds of times in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Domestic targets were no different, just softer. Freddie arrived at 11:30 p.m. in his Honda Civic, carrying a backpack that obviously contained cash. He was talking on his phone, distracted, not watching his surroundings. Amateur. Hubert moved like smoke, coming up behind Freddie as he fumbled with his keys. A rear naked choke, applied with precision. Freddie dropped in 7 seconds, unconscious but alive. Hubert zip-tied his hands and ankles, duct-taped his mouth, and dragged him into his own apartment. When Freddie woke up, he was sitting in his kitchen chair, secured. Hubert sat across from him in the dark, face still covered. "Not if you understand me," Hubert said, his voice flat and cold, the voice he used on targets. Freddie nodded frantically, eyes wide. "You work for Blake Ball. You collect money. Tonight, you can tell me everything about his operation, suppliers, clients, safe houses, schedules. If you lie, I'll know. If you refuse, you'll regret it. Not if you understand." Another frantic nod. Hubert removed the duct tape. "Talk." And Freddie talked. Fear was a powerful motivator. He spilled everything. The supplier was a distributor named Leon Roberts in D.C. Deliveries came through a storage unit in Petersburg. Blake kept a safe house in Colonial Heights where he stored product in cash. Detective Jerome Blake got paid $5,000 a month to tip Blake off about investigations and suppress charges. How much money is in that backpack? $43,000. It's this week's collections. Where's Blake keeping his exit money? The $400,000 from Mexico. Freddie blinked in surprise. "How did you?" Hubert leaned forward. "Answer the question." "The safe house. Hidden in the floor. He's planning to leave in 2 weeks. Is Miranda going with him?" "Blake says she is, but—" Freddie hesitated. "But what?" "But he told Zach that bitches are replaceable. That once he's in Mexico, he'll find someone younger. He's only taking Miranda because she signed custody papers that make it look legal." Hubert absorbed this. Blake was planning to take Laurel across the border, probably to use as leverage or worse. Once in Mexico, beyond U.S. law enforcement, anything could happen. "Last question. Blake killed a woman named Frances Cornell. What do you know about it? Freddie went pale. I don't know nothing about that, man. I swear. That's Blake's business. He doesn't tell us when he handles personal stuff. But you know he killed her. I heard him talking to his cousin about it. About making sure the coroner signed off. That's all I know. Hubert nodded. He'd gotten everything useful. Now came the decision. What to do with Freddie. In Afghanistan, this would be simple. Eliminate the threat, move on. But this was American soil, and Freddie was a small fish. More useful alive. Here's what happens next, Hubert said. You're going to call Blake tomorrow and tell him you were robbed. Someone broke into your apartment and took this week's money. You're terrified and you're quitting. You're leaving Richmond immediately. He'll kill me, Freddie whispered. Not if you're gone before he realizes what happened. I'm giving you a chance to walk away, Freddie. Don't waste it. Hubert took the backpack of cash, $43,000 that would fund his operation, and left Freddie tied in his apartment. He'd work himself free eventually. The next day, Freddie called Blake in a panic, exactly as instructed. Blake threatened him, raged at him, but by then Freddie was on a bus to North Carolina. Blake's organization had just lost its street-level distributor and a week's income. More importantly, Blake now knew someone was coming for him. He just didn't know it was the janitor. Chapter 7. Dismantling the Empire. Blake Ball was panicking, and men who panic make mistakes. After Freddie disappeared, Blake called an emergency meeting at Ink Dynasty. Hubert watched from across the street through a telephoto lens as Blake, Zach Gibson, and Detective Jerome Blake gathered in the back room. Through a directional microphone planted during an earlier reconnaissance, Hubert listened to their conversation. Blake, someone's moving on us. First, Freddie gets robbed and runs. Now I'm hearing the DEA is asking questions about the storage unit. Jerome, I told you to be careful. That Cornell situation was too messy. Killing his mom? In his house. You left too many loose ends. Blake, she threatened me. Said she'd go to the cops about Miranda. Zach, what about the janitor? Could he be behind this? Blake laughed. That pussy? He's barely holding it together. Can't even get custody of his kid. Nah, this is someone else. Maybe Leon's trying to squeeze us. Or maybe a rival crew. Jerome, doesn't matter who. You need to move up your timeline. Get out this weekend, not next week. Blake, I can't move that much product in 2 days. I'll take a bath on the inventory. Jerome, better than taking a cell in federal prison. Or a bullet from whoever's hunting you. Hubert smiled in the darkness. They were making it easy. Over the next 3 days, Hubert moved like a ghost through Blake's operation, systematically dismantling it. Thursday night, he broke into the storage unit in Petersburg where Blake kept shipments. Using equipment Marcus had procured, he photographed everything. Kilos of cocaine, fentanyl pills, distribution ledgers, scales, cutting agents. Then he called in an anonymous tip to the DEA's Richmond field office, providing detailed information about the unit's location and contents. By Friday morning, federal agents had raided it, seizing over $200,000 worth of drugs and evidence. Friday afternoon, he intercepted Leon Roberts, Blake's supplier, at a rest stop on I-95. Leon was driving a Mercedes with MD plates, heading to Richmond for a meeting. Hubert approached him in the parking lot, showed him a fake DEA badge, another gift from Marcus's connections, and told him his entire distribution network was compromised. Leon, terrified of federal prosecution, immediately cut ties with Blake and drove back to D.C. Saturday morning, he visited 3 of Blake's largest clients, suburban professionals who bought cocaine for weekend parties. Using information from Freddie's interrogation, Hubert approached each one, introduced himself as a concerned party, and informed them that Blake's operation was under federal investigation and anyone making purchases in the next week would be caught on surveillance. All 3 immediately cut ties with Blake. Saturday evening, he mailed a package to the Virginia State Police Internal Affairs Division. Inside, documentation of Detective Jerome Blake's corruption, including bank records showing $5,000 monthly deposits from his cousin, copies of suppressed police reports, and a burner phone containing recorded conversations between the 2 Blakes discussing evidence tampering. The package was sent anonymously but with enough verifiable detail to trigger an investigation. By Sunday morning, Blake's empire was in ruins. His supplier had ghosted him. His storage unit was seized. His clients had vanished. His protection was about to be revoked. And he still had no idea who was responsible. Hubert watched Blake's house from a rental car down the street. Miranda's car was there, as was Blake's Charger. Laurel was inside. Hubert's second supervised visitation wasn't until Tuesday, but he monitored the house daily. His phone rang. Marcus. Feds hit the storage unit hard. DEA's calling it one of the biggest busts in Richmond this year. They found ledgers with client names, going to cause a panic in the suburbs. Also, state police confirmed they're opening an investigation into Jerome Blake. He's been put on administrative leave. Good, Hubert said. Blake's about to realize his protection is gone. What's the endgame here, brother? You've destroyed his operation, but he's still in your house with your daughter. The endgame is Blake makes a desperate move, and when he does, I'll be waiting. And Miranda? Hubert's voice went cold. Miranda made her choice. She'll face the consequences. Monday afternoon, Blake finally understood the scope of the disaster. His phone exploded with panicked calls, clients refusing to answer, Leon unreachable, Jerome calling to say he couldn't help anymore because IA was investigating. When Blake tried to access his storage unit, he found it sealed by federal agents. Hubert watched through a window as Blake raged inside the tattoo parlor, throwing things, screaming at Zach Gibson. Then Blake made a call to Miranda. Hubert couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the result. Blake stormed out, got in the Charger, and sped toward Hubert's house. Hubert followed from a distance. At the house, Blake parked haphazardly and went inside. Through the window, Hubert saw an argument. Blake yelling, Miranda crying, Laurel hiding behind the couch. Blake grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing things into it. He was running. Then Blake grabbed Laurel. That was the line. Hubert was out of the rental car and moving before conscious thought kicked in. Years of training took over. He approached the house's side door, unlocked because Blake was arrogant, and entered silently. Inside, he heard Blake. We're leaving now. Mexico tonight. Get the money from the safe house. Miranda. What about custody? The papers. Blake. Fuck the papers. Feds are coming. Your ex somehow got them on me. We take the girl. We go now. I'm not going. Laurel screamed. I want my dad. The sound of slap. Hubert moved through the house like water, utterly silent. Delta operators trained in close-quarters combat until it was instinctive. He cleared the kitchen, the dining room, moved toward the living room. Blake had Laurel by the arm, dragging her toward the door. Miranda stood frozen, finally realizing the man she'd chosen was a monster. Zach Gibson was there too, holding a pistol loosely at his side. Let her go, Hubert said from the doorway, his voice absolutely calm. Everyone froze. Blake turned, still holding Laurel. The janitor. How the fuck did you? Let my daughter go, and we can talk about how this ends. Blake laughed, but it was shrill, panicked. You're the one who fucked my operation. Somehow you did this. I don't know how a loser like you pulled it off, but I'm not a janitor, Hubert said quietly. I never was. Blake's eyes narrowed, then widened as understanding hit. What are you? Delta Force. 12 years. 57 confirmed eliminations. You killed my mother, threatened my daughter, and thought you were dealing with a civilian. The room went silent. Zach's hand tightened on his pistol. Blake's face went pale. Bullshit, Blake said, but his voice shook. You're lying. I was in Kandahar when you called me. Bagram Airfield, Combat Outpost Charlie. I took a C-130 to Ramstein, then a military transport to Dover. I've been back for 2 weeks, systematically destroying everything you built. Your supplier's gone. Your product's seized. Your cop is about to be arrested. Your clients won't return your calls. You're finished, Blake. Blake's grip on Laurel tightened. Then I got nothing to lose. Zach, shoot this motherfucker. Zach raised his pistol, a cheap 9mm, held incorrectly with his finger already on the trigger. Amateur. Hubert moved. 12 years of training. 57 eliminations. Countless hours of close-quarters combat drills. Muscle memory took over. He crossed the distance in 2 steps, too fast for Zach to track. His hand shot out, gripping Zach's wrist and twisting outward with control violence. The angle was perfect, a classic disarm technique from Krav Maga, modified by Delta's combatives program. Zach's grip involuntarily loosened as his wrist rotated beyond its range of motion, ligaments protesting. The pistol clattered to the floor. I heard him talking to his cousin about it, about making sure the coroner signed off. That's all I know. Hubert nodded. He'd gotten everything useful. Now came the decision, what to do with Freddie. In Afghanistan, this would be simple. Eliminate the threat, move on. But this was American soil, and Freddie was a small fish. More useful alive. Here's what happens next, Hubert said. You're going to call Blake tomorrow and tell him you were robbed. Someone broke into your apartment and took this week's money. You're terrified and you're quitting. You're leaving Richmond immediately. He'll kill me, Freddie whispered. Not if you're gone before he realizes what happened. I'm giving you a chance to walk away, Freddie. Don't waste it. Hubert took the backpack of cash, $43,000 that would fund his operation, and left Freddie tied in his apartment. He'd work himself free eventually. The next day, Freddie called Blake in a panic, exactly as instructed. Blake threatened him, raged at him, but by then Freddie was on a bus to North Carolina. Blake's organization had just lost its street-level distributor and a week's income. More importantly, Blake now knew someone was coming for him. He just didn't know it was the janitor. Chapter 7. Dismantling the Empire. Blake Ball was panicking, and men who panic make mistakes. After Freddie disappeared, Blake called an emergency meeting at Ink Dynasty. Hubert watched from across the street through a telephoto lens as Blake, Zach Gibson, and Detective Jerome Blake gathered in the back room. Through a directional microphone planted during an earlier reconnaissance, Hubert listened to their conversation. Blake, someone's moving on us. First, Freddie gets robbed and runs. Now I'm hearing the DEA is asking questions about the storage unit. Jerome, I told you to be careful. That Cornell situation was too messy. Killing his mom? In his house. You left too many loose ends. Blake, she threatened me. Said she'd go to the cops about Miranda. Zach, what about the janitor? Could he be behind this? Blake laughed. That pussy? He's barely holding it together. Can't even get custody of his kid. Nah, this is someone else. Maybe Leon's trying to squeeze us. Or maybe a rival crew. Jerome, doesn't matter who. You need to move up your timeline. Get out this weekend, not next week. Blake, I can't move that much product in 2 days. I'll take a bath on the inventory. Jerome, better than taking a cell in federal prison. Or a bullet from whoever's hunting you. Hubert smiled in the darkness. They were making it easy. Over the next 3 days, Hubert moved like a ghost through Blake's operation, systematically dismantling it. Thursday night, he broke into the storage unit in Petersburg where Blake kept shipments. Using equipment Marcus had procured, he photographed everything. Kilos of cocaine, fentanyl pills, distribution ledgers, scales, cutting agents. Then he called in an anonymous tip to the DEA's Richmond field office, providing detailed information about the unit's location and contents. By Friday morning, federal agents had raided it, seizing over $200,000 worth of drugs and evidence. Friday afternoon, he intercepted Leon Roberts, Blake's supplier, at a rest stop on I-95. Leon was driving a Mercedes with MD plates, heading to Richmond for a meeting. Hubert approached him in the parking lot, showed him a fake DEA badge, another gift from Marcus's connections, and told him his entire distribution network was compromised. Leon, terrified of federal prosecution, immediately cut ties with Blake and drove back to D.C. Saturday morning, he visited 3 of Blake's largest clients, suburban professionals who bought cocaine for weekend parties. Using information from Freddie's interrogation, Hubert approached each one, introduced himself as a concerned party, and informed them that Blake's operation was under federal investigation and anyone making purchases in the next week would be caught on surveillance. All 3 immediately cut ties with Blake. Saturday evening, he mailed a package to the Virginia State Police Internal Affairs Division. Inside, documentation of Detective Jerome Blake's corruption, including bank records showing $5,000 monthly deposits from his cousin, copies of suppressed police reports, and a burner phone containing recorded conversations between the 2 Blakes discussing evidence tampering. The package was sent anonymously, but with enough verifiable detail to trigger an investigation. By Sunday morning, Blake's empire was in ruins. His supplier had ghosted him. His storage unit was seized. His clients had vanished. His protection was about to be revoked, and he still had no idea who was responsible. Hubert watched Blake's house from a rental car down the street. Miranda's car was there, as was Blake's Charger. Laurel was inside. Hubert's second supervised visitation wasn't until Tuesday, but he monitored the house daily. His phone rang. Marcus. Feds hit the storage unit hard. DEA's calling it one of the biggest busts in Richmond this year. They found ledgers with client names, going to cause a panic in the suburbs. Also, state police confirmed they're opening an investigation into Jerome Blake. He's been put on administrative leave. Good, Hubert said. Blake's about to realize his protection is gone. What's the endgame here, brother? You've destroyed his operation, but he's still in your house with your daughter. The endgame is Blake makes a desperate move, and when he does, I'll be waiting. And Miranda? Hubert's voice went cold. Miranda made her choice. She'll face the consequences. Monday afternoon, Blake finally understood the scope of the disaster. His phone exploded with panic calls, clients refusing to answer, Leon unreachable, Jerome calling to say he couldn't help anymore because IA was investigating. When Blake tried to access his storage unit, he found it sealed by federal agents. Hubert watched through a window as Blake raged inside the tattoo parlor, throwing things, screaming at Zach Gibson. Then Blake made a call to Miranda. Hubert couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the result. Blake stormed out, got in the Charger, and sped toward Hubert's house. Hubert followed from a distance. At the house, Blake parked haphazardly and went inside. Through the window, Hubert saw an argument. Blake yelling, Miranda crying, Laurel hiding behind the couch. Blake grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing things into it. He was running. Then Blake grabbed Laurel. That was the line. Hubert was out of the rental car and moving before conscious thought kicked in. Years of training took over. He approached the house's side door, unlocked because Blake was arrogant, and entered silently. Inside, he heard Blake. We're leaving now. Mexico tonight. Get the money from the safe house. Miranda. What about custody? The papers? Blake. Fuck the papers. Feds are coming. Your ex somehow got them on me. We take the girl, we go now. I'm not going. Laurel screamed. I want my dad. The sound of a slap. Hubert moved through the house like water, utterly silent. Delta operators trained in close-quarters combat until it was instinctive. He cleared the kitchen, the dining room, moved toward the living room. Blake had Laurel by the arm, dragging her toward the door. Miranda stood frozen, finally realizing the man she'd chosen was a monster. Zach Gibson was there too, holding a pistol loosely at his side. Let her go, Hubert said from the doorway, his voice absolutely calm. Everyone froze. Blake turned, still holding Laurel. The janitor. How the fuck did you? Let my daughter go, and we can talk about how this ends. Blake laughed, but it was shrill, panicked. You're the one who fucked my operation. Somehow you did this. I don't know how a loser like you pulled it off, but I'm not a janitor, Hubert said quietly. I never was. Blake's eyes narrowed, then widened as understanding hit. What are you? Delta Force. 12 years. 57 confirmed eliminations. You killed my mother, threatened my daughter, and thought you were dealing with a civilian. The room went silent. Zach's hand tightened on his pistol. Blake's face went pale. Bullshit, Blake said, but his voice shook. You're lying. I was in Kandahar when you called me. Bagram Airfield, Combat Outpost Charlie. I took a C-130 to Ramstein, then a military transport to Dover. I've been back for 2 weeks, systematically destroying everything you built. Your supplier's gone. Your product's seized. Your cop is about to be arrested. Your clients won't return your calls. You're finished, Blake. Blake's grip on Laurel tightened. Then I got nothing to lose. Zach, shoot this motherfucker. Zach raised his pistol, a cheap 9mm, held incorrectly with his finger already on the trigger. Amateur. Hubert moved. 12 years of training. 57 eliminations. Countless hours of close-quarters combat drills. Muscle memory took over. He crossed the distance in 2 steps, too fast for Zach to track. His hand shot out, gripping Zach's wrist and twisting outward with controlled violence. The angle was perfect, a classic disarm technique from Krav Maga, modified by Delta's combatives program. Zach's grip involuntarily loosened as his wrist rotated beyond its range of motion, ligaments protesting. The pistol clattered to the floor. Hubert didn't pause. His other hand came up in a palm strike to Zach's nose, precise and devastating. Cartilage crunched. Zach staggered back, blood exploding from his face, and Hubert followed with a knee to the solar plexus that folded him like paper. Zach hit the floor gasping, completely neutralized. Elapsed time, 3 seconds. Blake stumbled backward, dragging Laurel with him. "Stay back. I'll hurt her." "No, you won't," Hubert said, his voice still eerily calm. "Because if you do, I'll make sure you die slowly. But if you let her go right now, I'll let you run. You got maybe an hour before the DEA figures out where you are. That's your only chance." Blake's eyes darted between Hubert and the door. Calculation and fear warred on his face. He was a predator who'd spent his life preying on the weak, but now he faced something he'd never encountered. Someone harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. "You're bluffing," Blake said, but his voice cracked. Hubert took one step forward. "Do I look like I'm bluffing?" Something in Hubert's eyes, the absolute certainty, the cold promise of violence, broke Blake's resolve. He shoved Laurel forward and ran for the door. Hubert caught his daughter, holding her close. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." Miranda stood against the wall, mascara streaking her face. "Hubert, I didn't know." "Not now," he said, his voice ice. To Laurel, "Go to Mrs. Rivers's house next door. Run. Don't look back." "Daddy, don't leave me again," Laurel sobbed. "I'm not leaving. I'm finishing this. Go. Now." Laurel ran out the side door toward Helen's house. Zach was still on the floor, groaning. Miranda was crying, frozen by shock and guilt. Hubert picked up Zach's pistol, checked the chamber, and walked out the front door. Blake was in the Charger, engine roaring to life. "Hubert, wait." Miranda called. "Don't do something you'll regret." But Hubert Cornell, Ghost, had no regrets about what came next. Some men deserved mercy. Some needed justice. And some, like Blake Ball, needed to simply cease existing. He got in his rental car and followed the Charger into the night. Chapter 8. The Safe House. Blake drove like a madman, running red lights and weaving through traffic. He was heading south toward Colonial Heights, where his safe house waited, the place Freddie had told Hubert about. The place where $400,000 in cash was hidden beneath the floorboards, his escape money. Hubert followed from a distance, using techniques learned from years of surveillance operations. He didn't need to stay close. He knew where Blake was going. The safe house was a nondescript bungalow in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place that attracted no attention. Blake pulled into the driveway, then noticed a black SUV already parked there. DEA. They'd been faster than Hubert expected. The anonymous tips had led them from the storage unit to Blake's financial records, and from there to this address. 2 agents stood at the door, preparing to breach. Blake threw the Charger in reverse, but another SUV blocked the driveway. He was boxed in. For a moment, Hubert watched from down the street as Blake sat frozen in his car, surrounded. Then Blake did something desperate and stupid. He floored it, jumping the curb and tearing through a neighbor's yard, trying to escape. The DEA agent shouted. One spoke into a radio, calling for backup, but Blake was already 3 blocks away, the Charger's powerful engine carrying him toward the industrial area near the Appomattox River. Hubert followed, staying back. This was no longer about revenge. It was about justice and closure. Blake's Charger skidded into an abandoned warehouse district, old factories that had been shuttered for decades. He parked behind a decaying building and ran inside on foot. Hubert parked and followed, entering through a side entrance. Inside, the building was a maze of rusted machinery and collapsed catwalks. Moonlight streamed through broken windows, casting long shadows. "Come out, Blake," Hubert called, his voice echoing. "It's over. The DEA's coming. You've got nowhere to go. Fuck you." Blake's voice came from deeper in the building. "You ruined everything. I had it all. Money, a woman, a kid, respect. You took it all. You took my mother's life, Hubert said, moving silently through the shadows, tracking Blake's voice. You threatened my daughter. You thought you could do that without consequences because I was just a janitor. But consequences are coming, Blake. They've been coming since the moment you put your hands on my family. I'll kill you, Blake screamed. A gunshot cracked through the warehouse. Blake had a gun, probably the .45 he kept at the safe house. The bullet hit a wall 3 feet from Hubert. Another amateur mistake, firing without a clear target, giving away his position. Hubert moved like smoke, flanking Blake's position. He could see Blake now, crouched behind an old machine press, wild-eyed and desperate. You know what they teach us in Delta? Hubert said conversationally, his voice coming from a different direction than he actually was. They teach us that fear is a weapon, that a panicked enemy makes mistakes. You're making mistakes, Blake. You've been making them since you thought killing my mother would go unpunished. Blake fired twice more, both shots wide. My mother was a 65-year-old woman who worked as a school cafeteria manager for 30 years, Hubert continued, moving closer. She raised me alone after my father died, volunteered at homeless shelters, baked cookies for neighborhood kids, and you suffocated her because she told you to leave my wife alone. She was in my way, Blake shouted, reloading clumsily. No, she was protecting her family, and now I'm protecting mine. Hubert stepped into view, 20 feet from Blake. He wasn't armed. He'd left Zach's pistol in the car. He didn't need it. Blake raised his .45 with shaking hands. Don't move. I'll shoot. You'll try, Hubert said. But you're not a killer, Blake. Not really. You've hurt people, sure. Beaten them up, intimidated them. You killed my mother when she was defenseless. But you've never faced someone who's trained to kill. Someone who's good at it. Blake fired. The shot went wide by inches. His hand was shaking too badly. Hubert closed the distance before Blake could fire again. He moved with the efficiency of long training. A strike to Blake's wrist that sent the gun flying, a sweep that put Blake on his back, then Hubert's knee on Blake's chest, pinning him. Please, Blake gasped. Don't kill me. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. About your mom. About Jerome. All of it. Hubert looked down at the man who destroyed his family. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, he'd eliminated targets without hesitation. Bad men doing bad things, removed to protect the innocent. This was no different. Except it was. Because this wasn't war. This was home. And killing Blake here, in cold blood, would make Hubert the monster Blake thought he was. You're going to prison, Hubert said finally. You're going to confess to my mother's murder. You're going to testify about Jerome's corruption. And you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell, knowing you destroyed everything because you underestimated a janitor. The sound of sirens grew closer. The DEA had tracked Blake here. Hubert stood, leaving Blake gasping on the ground. He walked toward the sound of approaching vehicles, hands raised, ready to explain everything. But as he reached the door, he heard Blake laughing behind him, a manic, broken sound. You think you won? Blake called out. I'll beat this. My lawyer will. Your lawyer can't help you, Hubert said without turning around. The DEA has your drugs, your ledgers, your money. State police have evidence of Jerome's corruption. And I have a recording of you confessing to killing Francis Cornell. Blake's laughter stopped. What? Hubert pulled out his phone. Press play. Blake's voice, recorded during their conversation in the house. Your ex somehow got them on me. Feds are coming. We take the girl, we go now. And earlier, from their first phone call, your mother, I might have helped it along, pushed her face down into that plate a little harder than necessary. I recorded everything, Hubert said. Every call, every threat, every confession. You're done, Blake. DEA agents burst through the warehouse door, weapons drawn. On the ground. Both of you. Hubert complied immediately, lying flat, hands visible. Blake tried to run and was tackled by 3 agents. As they put Blake in handcuffs, one agent approached Hubert. Who are you? Hubert Cornell. I'm the victim's son. Blake Ball murdered my mother, Francis Cornell, 2 weeks ago. I have evidence. The agent studied him. You're the Delta operator, the one who called in all those anonymous tips. Hubert said nothing, which was answer enough. We'll need to take your statement. Don't leave town. I'm not going anywhere, Hubert said. I'm staying with my daughter. Chapter 9. Aftermath. The next 3 months were a blur of legal proceedings, but they moved in Hubert's favor. Blake Ball was charged with first-degree murder, Frances Cornell, kidnapping, Laurel Cornell, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. The voice analysis of the 911 call proved Blake had staged Frances's death and called for help in a disguised voice. Combined with Helen Rivers' testimony and Hubert's recordings, the case was airtight. Blake's public defender advised him to take a plea deal, life in prison without parole, in exchange for testifying against his cousin. Detective Jerome Blake was charged with corruption, evidence tampering, and being an accessory after the fact to murder. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Zach Gibson took a deal and received 5 years for assault and drug distribution. Leon Roberts, the supplier, was arrested in D.C. on separate charges. Miranda Cornell faced her own reckoning. While she hadn't been directly involved in Frances's murder, she'd known Blake was dangerous, had allowed him around Laurel, and had actively worked to deny Hubert custody while planning to flee the country. She was charged with child endangerment and conspiracy to commit custodial interference. Her lawyer negotiated a deal: 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and permanent loss of custody. Hubert got full custody of Laurel in an uncontested hearing. Judge Connor, after reviewing all the evidence, apologized to Hubert for doubting him. "Mr. Cornell," she said, "your service to this country and your dedication to your daughter are commendable. I'm sorry the system failed you and your mother. Custody is granted to you, full and permanent." 6 months after that night in the warehouse, Hubert and Laurel moved to a new house in Northern Virginia, closer to Fort Bragg but not too close. Hubert had resigned from Delta Force. Colonel Turner accepted it with understanding. "You've earned your rest, Ghost," Turner said. 57 eliminations in service to your country. Time to be a father. Hubert took a job as a defense contractor consultant, using his skills to train other operators. The pay was better, the hours were regular, and most importantly, he was home every night. Laurel was healing. She saw a therapist twice a week, processing the trauma of witnessing her grandmother's death and Blake's violence. She had nightmares, but they were getting less frequent. She smiled more, laughed more. One Saturday morning, Hubert was making pancakes, Frances's recipe, when Laurel came into the kitchen. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything, princess." "Were you really a—" She lowered her voice. "An assassin?" Hubert knelt down to her level. "I was a soldier. I did things that were necessary to protect people. Bad things to bad people, so good people could be safe. But that's over now. Now I'm just your dad." "Did you kill Blake?" "No. He's in prison. He's going to stay there for the rest of his life." "Good." Laurel hugged him. "I'm glad you're not a ghost anymore. I like having a real dad." That afternoon, they visited Frances's grave. Hubert had arranged for a proper headstone. Frances Cornell, 1958 to 2024. Beloved mother and grandmother. Her sacrifice will never be forgotten. Grandma," Laurel said, placing flowers on the grave. "Daddy and I made your pancake recipe today. Mine were lumpy, but Daddy said that's okay. I miss you." Hubert stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect you, Ma, but I made sure the man who hurt you paid. And I promise I'll take care of Laurel. She'll grow up knowing how much you loved her." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell. That evening, Marcus Smith drove up from Fort Bragg to visit. They sat on Hubert's porch, drinking beer while Laurel played in the backyard. "You did good, brother," Marcus said. "Blake's in federal supermax. Jerome's getting beat up daily in Gen Pop. Miranda lost everything. And you got your daughter back." "Yeah," Hubert said, "but Ma's still gone. Frances would be proud of you. You protected Laurel. You got justice. You did it without becoming the monster Blake was." "I thought about it," Hubert admitted. "Killing him. It would have been easy. One bullet. Make it look like suicide or an accident. But you didn't. I didn't want Laurel to grow up knowing her father was a murderer. Blake deserved to die, but the law's handling it. He'll rot in a cell. That's enough." Marcus clinked his beer bottle against Hubert's. To Francis. And to you coming home. To being home, Hubert agreed. Later that night, after Marcus left and Laurel was asleep, Hubert sat in his office, looking at a shadow box on the wall. Inside was his Delta Force patch, his service medals, and a photo of his team, Ghost, and the other operators who'd served with him. 57 confirmed eliminations. 12 years of service. Countless missions in the shadows. But the most important mission had been this one, protecting his daughter, honoring his mother, and proving that sometimes the quiet ones, the janitors, the men nobody notices, are the most dangerous of all. Hubert Cornell, call sign Ghost, was finally at peace. Epilogue. 3 years later, Laurel Cornell stood in front of her 5th grade class, presenting a project about heroes. My hero is my dad, she said confidently. A lot of people didn't believe in him. They thought he was just a janitor. But he was actually a soldier who protected our country. When bad people hurt our family, he didn't give up. He was smart and brave and strong. He taught me that being a hero isn't about being loud or showing off. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Even when people don't believe in you. She held up a photo. Hubert in his dress uniform, medals gleaming, holding a much younger Laurel. My grandma used to say that heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear boots. Sometimes they wear uniforms. And sometimes they just look like normal dads. But they're heroes because they protect the people they love no matter what. The class applauded. The teacher wiped her eyes. After school, Laurel ran to where Hubert was waiting in the pickup line. How'd the presentation go, princess? Perfect. I told them you're a hero. Hubert smiled. A real smile, the kind that had been rare before, but came easier now. I'm just a dad who loves his daughter. You're both, Laurel said, climbing into the car. Can we get ice cream? Always. As they drove away, the sun setting over Northern Virginia, Hubert glanced in the rearview mirror. No shadows followed him. No ghosts haunted him. He was home. He was a father. And he had finally found peace. The ghost had been laid to rest.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.